Today is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. It's 3 o'clock, and so what we'd like to do is call the Elections Commission or Committee to order. Today we have a small agenda. We're going to do a little bit of review, but we have, as you guys know, welcome everybody. Welcome our new members. Welcome our. Well, we've got a few of them here. Doesn't look like we have quorum yet. We are here. We're in a shared environment. I'm State Senator Mark Rand from Chisago and Isani County. I've had the pleasure to be on elections since I arrived at the Senate in 2017. And so what we'd like to do, we're going to go through some introductions, and then I'll turn it over to our co-chair, Senator Carlson, for some of his comments, and then we'll get to our agenda. So if we could start down to my right, Mr. Weber.
Hi, Bill Weber, Senate District 21. My district encompasses all or parts of 9 counties in the southwest corner of Minnesota. Good to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am one of the new members you just referenced. I am Eric Lucero from District 30, which includes Albertville, St. Michael, Otsego, Elk River area. And when I do these introductions, most of the time people agree that that is the best area of the state.
Senator Lucero, we're trying not to lay out the gauntlet because by the time we get to the end, we're going to have a novel or a biography. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Senator Liz Bolden. I represent District 25, which is most of Rochester and some areas just north of Rochester.
Senator Cal Barr, District 31, next to Senator Lucero's, and it's North Anoka County with 1 precinct in Isani County.
My name is Melissa Field. I am a co-committee administrator for the GOP.
Andrew Erickson with Senate Council Research and Fiscal Analysis. I'm the fiscal analyst for the Elections Committee, also covering state gov, pensions, and vets and military affairs.
Lexi Stengel, nonpartisan Senate Counsel.
Senator Jim Carlson from District 52, which includes most of Eagan, most of Mendota Heights, some of Burnsville, and all of the city of Mendota. And I've been on the Elections Committee since it started back in the early 2000s. And I'm pleased to be here and look forward to having one of the best committees again in the legislature.
I'm Beth Fraser, one of the committee administrators for the committee.
Senator Bonnie Westland. I represent Senate District 42, which includes Plymouth, a sliver of southwest Maple Grove, and the city of Madison Lake. And this will be my 3rd year on the committee. And I am the vice chair of the committee.
Hi, I'm Christy Blood. I am the committee legislative assistant for the Elections Committee and work with Senator Carlson.
Hi, I'm Madeline Stankevich. I am the legislative assistant for Senator Westland.
Hi, Steve Swedzinski, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka. Great committee, by the way. The people on it and the subject matter that we talk about is just so intellectually stimulating. It's great to be back.
I'm Warren Limmer, state senator from West Hennepin County and parts of Maple Grove.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Limmer. Members at the table. So we have staff in the back. Mr. Cheetah and the Republican and Democrat staff come up and introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are. In addition to our pages, they could come up as well.
I'm Tom Cheetah. I'm the Republican researcher for the committee.
Will Freeman. I'm the DFL researcher for the committee.
Roan Chafee, one of the pages for room 1200.
Hi, everyone. Olivia Anderson. I'm also one of the 1200 pages. I'm Chloe Aday, also a committee page.
Excellent. We have quorum, and we have one member that just joined. Senator Port, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Lindsay Port, represent Burnsville and Savage in District 55, and I'm joining today from Burnsville.
Excellent. So we've completed Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify for anybody watching online, when Olivia said she's one of the 1,200 pages, that would be room 1,200, not 1,200 employees.
Senator Swedzinski, great catch. Thank you. So with that, we've done introductions, and so I'm just happy to be here. We're operating in a shared environment right now. We hope that continues. Well, it's been an interesting start of the legislative session. Today on our agenda, we have just a review and then one bill, so we get to go through a little work today. And with that, I'll turn over to for comments from Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Co-Chair Coran. I'm Jim Carlson again, and I just want to tell you that I'm so glad that during this period that I belong to the Minnesota Senate, and that we have come up with a very good agreement so that we could co-chair and co-administer the Elections Committee, and it's working very well. Senator Coran and I just had a conversation where we found things already that we agree on. And so that's, I think it's working out very well, and I look forward to that. I want to welcome our new members, Senator Lucero and Senator Weber. And I just have to say that we have smaller jurisdiction than a lot of committees, but we do have to come up with a budget for the committee. And we have the responsibilities of protecting and expanding the freedom to vote in Minnesota, maintaining and expanding the transparency on how elections are financed and how entities do try to influence us. And while we are co-chairs, Senator Coran and I have agreed to swap the gavel after each hearing, so you'll see me and then you'll see Senator Coran again, and only put items on the agenda that we both agree to hear. So we'll also be, to the extent practicable, be publicly posting amendments before hearings, and also hopefully trying to follow our posting deadlines so that we can all see the bills before we have to discuss them here on the floor. And I appreciate how everything is going so well so far, and look forward to today's agenda.
Excellent. Thanks, Senator Carlson. So we'll thank you all the members and staff. We'll move on to our agenda. And so we've got the Campaign Finance Board Executive, Mr. Sigurdson, if you'd state your name and your position, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you for having me today. Jeff Sigurdson, Executive Director with the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public
Mr. Sigurdson, if you could pull the mic directly in front of you. Thank you.
Is that better?
It doesn't. Just point it towards you. There you
How about that?
Let's try it. A little better.
A little better.
Thank you.
All right. Again, my name is Jeff Sigurdson. I'm the Executive Director with the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. I'm aware that most of you are very familiar with the board's actions, but I did want to give a brief overview, talk about, again, the mission of the board, the composition of the board, and a confirmation hearing that will be before you shortly. And then look at the three major programs that the board administers, give you a little bit of information that occurred from the 2024 election, and then talk about the report that the legislature asked the board to do on lobbying of political subdivisions. The mission of the board is to promote public confidence in state government decision-making, in particular through disclosure of potential sources of influence on official actions. That can be contributions to political committees and party units. It could be information disclosed on an economic interest statement of a potential conflict of interest, and also on the lobbying program, so that there's public awareness of the individuals and associations and the issues that they bring to the legislature and hope to have action on. The board is an independent agency. Our budget is included in the governor's overall budget request, but we are separate from the, we are not a cabinet agency, of course, and we are separate from the governor's office. The board consists of 6 members, no more than half of which may be from any political party, and at least 2 members must be former legislators, 1 of each from party. Members are appointed for a 4-year term. We have 10 FTEs and 1 part-time position, and we're currently located in the Centennial Office Building. The confirmation hearing that I referenced, members who are they're appointed need to be confirmed by both the House and the Senate, which is unusual. I believe there's only 2 boards and commissions where appointments have to be confirmed by both the House and the Senate. They must be confirmed by 3/5 of both bodies. And appointments must occur within the 45th legislative day of when the appointment is made. The one member that we have that's currently the clock is ticking on is member Steve Swanson. He's a current member who has been reappointed. He has a DFL affiliation. He's a retired district court judge, and hopefully we'll have him before you shortly for his confirmation hearing. We do have a vacancy. The former Republican legislator position that was held by former Senator Dave Kleiss has been, he has unfortunately resigned from the board, and so that position is now open. The other position that will be coming open is currently held by George Soul, who is also a Republican. His term expired on January 1st, but the statute provides that he can continue to serve until July 1st or until an appointment is made. So he's still serving, but it is somewhat of a concern to me because we have to have 4 members for a quorum. So certainly we'll be working with the governor's office to find new appointments and hopefully have those before you for confirmation before the session is over. Quickly looking at the budget for fiscal years 26 and 27, the board has not requested any change items. The base budget is $1,793,000, and the board believes that's sufficient for the current responsibilities, including the new responsibilities that were added on to the board at the last session or brought under the board's jurisdiction under the last session. My understanding is that the governor's budget proposal does provide for a $26,000 increase in fiscal year 26 and a $53,000 increase in fiscal year 27 in recognition of likely inflationary increases and in recognition that, of course, the MEP and ASME contracts will be negotiated. The majority of the budget is in fixed cost. 89% of the budget goes to salary, office space lease, and unavoidable minute costs for email, Azure services, and things like that. The remaining 11% covers postage, office supplies, the typical sort of things that you would for any office. 77 independent expenditure committees. I break those out separate from the other 378 political committees and funds because the regulation of those entities is so much different than a regular political committee or fund. And new for this year, starting January 1st of 2025, we are also responsible for committees that are formed at the local level for supporting ballot questions, county, city, school district ballot, whether it be a bond issue or a levy increase, whatever it may be. That is also under the board's jurisdiction, so those committees will be registering and reporting to us. Our tools for enforcement and disclosure, we are limited to civil penalties. Of course, we have no authority over criminal penalties. But because the board and I believe the legislature realized that the potential for damage to any candidate or any political entity is so great just from the accusation of a violation of Chapter 10A, that it's a very rigid procedure that the board follows in terms of following up on a complaint. There's a prima facie determination, a probable cause, and then finally a findings. So it's at least 3 months because it's dealt with each time before the board, and there's opportunities in those cases for the individual or association that's being complained against to appear before the board and provide evidence as to why the allegation is not true, or at least provide mitigating factors. So again, it's set up very much to protect the rights of those who have been accused of a violation, and I do always want to sort of provide that because I know sometimes there's some question as to why it takes so long for the board to get through a complaint and come to a resolution. It's because there is, again, this belief that the more important thing is to make sure that the person who's accused has more than ample opportunity to present their side of the situation. The staff also reviews periodic reports looking for frankly, many violations are actually reported to us in terms of excess contributions or spending limit violations, and so the board staff does have the ability to open an investigation of those areas. In the end, all of the periodic reports that we receive for all the programs end up on our website. both in summary form and also, of course, the individual reports. And all of the enforcement actions are also available. And I would also quickly mention that there are about 430 advisory opinions that are available and searchable on our website, which is often useful when you talk about some of the more, I suppose, obscure sections of Chapter 10A and areas where people want to make sure they understand the intent of the statute. The board very much believes that training and client support is a huge part of what we do. We recognize that most committees, not all, but most committees are really based upon a volunteer treasurer, and that the volunteer treasurer probably didn't exactly know what they were stepping into when they agreed to be a treasurer for a political committee or a principal campaign committee registered with the board. And we want to support that person. We believe that they are doing it because they're interested in politics. They want to be a part of the process. And rather than sort of punishing them for making that rash decision, we want to support them so that they can provide the sort of information that's required by statute and that they can do so in a timely and accurate manner. We do that. One thing that's came through, I guess, as a benefit, we believe, just because it made us realize that the pandemic ended our in-person training. And we found out that amazingly enough, people don't like to drive to St. Paul to have a 3-hour compliance training course, but it's much better if we offer that training as a webinar. It's recorded, so if they can't attend, they can watch it 24/7. We break it into sections so that they can jump to a section on what they want to see. For using our online application, CFRO, the application that we have for reporting for campaign finance, I think we're up to 25 videos, and we have more planned. Again, very short videos, very specific on how to do something in the software. And we can tell from measuring the number of hits that those videos receive during a year that it's popular. If you're a treasurer trying to file your report at 11 o'clock at night and you're just not sure how to put in a loan, to be able to go find a video that's how to put in a loan and watch it for 2 minutes and then be able to complete the report is a real benefit. And so we are trying to upgrade our training. You may recall that at the last year, the board was given additional funding to work on providing even more online training, and we were continuing to do that process and again, enhance our training. The public subsidy program, we administer the public subsidy program. In 2024, we paid out $2,107,940 to 230 House candidates. The average payment was $9,164. You may recall that there was a one-time increase to the money available for the public subsidy program. This payment, the $9,000 amount, is roughly 3 times the amount that it was in 2022. So that was a substantial increase. That was a one-time increase, so I will point that out. But nonetheless, it was a substantial increase. The portion, it won't just benefit House candidates. The portion of that one-time increase is carried forward for constitutional and the Senate candidates, so that will be available, and you should see a much larger payment in 2026 than you saw in 2022. 93% of candidates signed the public subsidy agreement. Also, part of the public subsidy program is the political contribution refund program. Here, my numbers are somewhat dated. We receive information once a year in August from the Department of Revenue on the number of PCR receipts that they refunded by candidate and by party. The last year that we have at this point is 2023, but you can see this is $447,000, a little bit more than that, refunded to candidate donors, and $1,616,000 to party donors. I want to point out this is still when the maximum amount was $50. So it's now up to $75 per donor, $150 per couple. So we expect both the fact that 2024 was an election year and that we have the increase to $75, that these numbers will probably be substantially higher the next time I'm reporting on this. Roughly, and this is not just for 2023, but historically, about 30% of the donations from individuals to candidates end up being refunded by the Department of Revenue. Moving on to the Economic Interest Statement Program. This is, of course, where individuals, public officials, disclose possible conflicts of interest when public officials make an official action, if the possibility that it may may impact their personal financial situation. They disclose the sources of income, investments, property holdings, and also other contracts that they may have that may be influenced again, by their official actions. This is the first cycle that we've also had disclosure of the public official spouse's holdings as well. The annual certification is for about 3,100 in public officials, so it's not just elected officials. There are many state officials who are also covered by this requirement. And we also then collect the from candidates who file for state level office. That's also filed with the board. The lobbying program, disclosure and limit influence of public officials by associations that wish to influence the official actions. Again, what we're really trying to get here is disclosure. I don't think the board does not view this as a way, in any way, to limit the discussion or the access of lobbyists to public officials, understanding that there is a gift prohibition and then there is a prohibition on contributions during the legislative session. This is, again, just basically a disclosure program in which individuals need to acknowledge what associations they are representing when they come and work at the Capitol or with an administrative agency to try to influence administrative rules, or with a metropolitan government agency, or with the Public Utilities Commission when they try to influence certain actions that entity takes. There are about 1,450 lobbyists registered. They represent about 1,500 principals or associations who are paying them for representation. The current, and this is kind of a broad brush, there are some exceptions and if and buts on this definition, but generally registration is required if an individual receives over $3,000 in compensation for lobbying for one of those, for an association. In total, in other words, they could receive $2,000 from this association and another $2,000 from the second association, and now they're over $3,000, so they have to register for both. There are other ways in which you can be required to register as a lobbyist if you are not paid, but you spend over $3,000 of your own funds to support your lobbying. That requires registration. And then also if you work for a corporation who provides government services or tries to provides information on influencing the government, and you are providing information that's used in Minnesota and are paid over $3,000, that also requires registration as a lobbyist. Again, just real briefly, there are four types of lobbying. There's the legislative process, which includes actions by the governor, the adoption of administrative rules by state agencies, certain decisions by the Public Utilities Commission dealing with rate increases, the siting of power plants, power line sightings, things like that. The metropolitan governmental units, which are the 7 counties, 16 cities with a population of over 50,000, and then entities like the Metropolitan Council or the MAC, things like that. However, that last definition, metropolitan area governmental units, will change. Starting June 1st, it will be replaced by all political subdivisions. So now we're going from 7 counties to 87, from 16 cities. I think the number is 365 cities. I think there's like 260 school districts and 1,776 townships. I heard that number yesterday in the committee. So there are a lot of entities that will now be brought under the lobbying program in terms of registration and reporting if you're trying to influence official actions of those political subdivisions. Because of the I think, kind of dramatic increase in scope of the lobbying program, the legislature at the last session did assign a duty to the board, which was to look at the local political, well, before I hit that, I'm sorry, I forgot about this slide. Again, I've talked about the gift prohibition. The reports are twice a year by lobbyists, once a year by principals. In 2023, the principals reported spending $98,370,000 on lobbying expenditures in Minnesota. Again, that would not include political subdivisions, as it will after June 1st. And just given the general slope of increases, I really have no doubt in 2024 it will for the first time go over $100 million in expenditures on lobbying in the state. We also changed the lobbying program so that they no longer are reporting the amount that they spent on their cell phone or in their office space, but rather they need to report the specific political subdivision or political entity that they were working with, whether it be the legislature, particular city, particular agency on administrative rules, or the Public Utilities Commission, and then they have to provide specific information on the issue that they were working on as well. So that's the first time that we've had, this is the first year that we've collected information on the subjects that are being lobbied on as opposed to the amount that they spent on administrative costs related to lobbying. Okay. So again, we're back to the report, which I know I sent a copy to each one of you. I'm sure you've all read it at this point. I will say that the first 27 or 28 pages are actually the report. The rest of the material is written comments that the board received at 2 public hearings that were held on the whole issue of how can we change, or are changes appropriate to the lobbying program in terms of political subdivisions. We provided all the commentary that we received, even in cases, frankly, when the board didn't agree with the commentary, because we do believe that this is important information. In some cases, the arguments were very well presented, but the board either felt that it was outside of its jurisdiction in terms of, maybe jurisdiction was the wrong word, it was outside of the scope of the report, that there were issues being brought forward on the nature of lobbying that were broader and have a much wider impact than just political subdivisions. And the board has brought those issues forward, but it doesn't have a recommendation on most of those issues, because again, we think it's simply broader than what the legislature was expecting in this report. But there are 2 legislative proposals which at some point I hope the legislature will consider. One is dealing with the issue of expert testimony. Expert testimony, there's already an exception existing in statute which says that you do not need to register and report as a lobbyist if you are an expert witness or providing expert testimony, if you were requested to do so by the government entity that you're presenting to. So in other words, the legislature, if this committee asked for an expert on some issue to come present before it, well, that individual doesn't have to register as a lobbyist because you requested that person to come in. From what the testimony we received at the local level, it's a different dynamic. The expert testimony is brought forward much more often to local agencies, whether it be a city council or a planning commission, county commissioners, because they don't frankly have the same resources that you do. If you're looking for expert information on pollution control, you have a pollution control agency. If you're looking for expert testimony on, I don't know, a particular health issue, you have Department of Health. That isn't always a resource that small cities or school districts or townships have, and so they rely on civil engineers and other individuals with legal expertise, for example, to be brought forward to provide advice to them on how to proceed or whether or not a particular situation can be dealt with. Trying to recognize that that is a distinction and that it shouldn't really require those individuals to register as a lobbyist. For example, the civil engineer, they have a housing development. They were hired to provide information on what the city will need to do in terms of water and sewer. That was really why they were hired. They're providing that information to the city council. The city council is, and they were requested to provide that information to the city council by a lobbyist, so it is part of a lobbying effort, but it's technical information. On the other hand, there were several entities, Clean Elections Minnesota, Common Cause Minnesota, who were concerned that this was building a loophole, that soon everybody would say that they were providing expert testimony, and we would start having gaps in the information that was being provided, or at least understanding who is coming before these government entities to provide this information. So the board's recommendation is that, one, there is a recognition that expert witnesses, and there's a definition that's provided, do not need to register and report themselves as a lobbyist, But to minimize the possibility that there will be a gap in the disclosure provided, the board is also recommending that the lobbyist report be amended to add a new schedule. So if a lobbyist or a principal asks for an individual to testify on their behalf, then that individual has to be reported by the lobbyist, their name, their employer, if they have one, the subject on which they are testifying, and then also the political subdivision that they are testifying in front of. So the same information, frankly, that you would receive if they did need to register as a lobbyist is still being provided. You'll still be able to see if this expert is testifying in multiple cities, be able to sort of track them across the entirety of their efforts, and still get to the point where the civil engineer, where again, we're doing appropriate registration and disclosure and not trying to bring in everybody who was before a city council or a zoning commission or a planning commission. Trying to focus in, again, only on those people who are actually trying to influence the action, but providing disclosure on the people who are being called on to provide information that may influence that decision. The other issue that the board believes it was brought forward by many entities involved with the political subdivisions, the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities comes to mind in particular, is that under the current definition, if there is no change, employees of a political subdivision that work with other political subdivisions, for example, employees for a city that are working with a county on a joint road or a county road that passes through the city, if they're working on that, arguably during the discussion of how do we maintain that road, how do we upgrade that road, that has a component of trying to influence the other political subdivision. You know, you're trying to get the county to do more, or the county's trying to get the city to put in a roundabout. I don't know the specifics, but you know, there could be those sort of situations. Two townships trying to set up a fire district, for example. If you're working with another political subdivision, there could be cases where employees are crossing that line and now are doing something that requires registration. The board doesn't think that that is providing the type of information that really fits into the lobbying program. The lobbying program is, political subdivisions working together to work on a regional problem or to address a common service that they provide to their citizens isn't, I think, what the public is expecting to see in the lobbying program. So the board is recommending a modification to that current requirement so that, again, employees of a political subdivision do not need to register and report as a lobbyist if they're working with employees of another political subdivision on some joint project. There are also a couple of minor changes dealing with definitions. I really do think those are more technical, and I won't take the committee's time on that. But those are the issues. That's probably the limit of what the board will have for legislative proposals. I say probably. The board did want to talk about one other possible issue at the next board meeting, but I think this will be the major area that the board has a concern on. We do believe these two changes would make the program for registration and reporting for lobbying of political subdivisions easier for the board to administer, less burdensome for the individuals who are covered by that program, both who work for the political subdivisions and who frankly, who lobby those institutions as well. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm certainly happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sigurdson. Members, questions? Senator Bolden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am wondering if you have information or if you are able to tell the proportion, so I'm going to talk about the PCR, the proportion of donations that are eligible for refunding that are refunded. So for instance, you know, if people make a donation and they don't know about the PCR, they don't submit it, they don't get refunded.
Mr. Sigurdson?
Mr. Chair, Senator, I think I could come up with numbers that look at the, in a limited way, I could perhaps address your question. I could look at contributions from itemized contributions, because itemized contributions have the address of the individual. And I could tell you the proportion of people who are residents of Minnesota and we could maybe look at that number. The problem with that is that unitemized contributions are not itemized to us as well. So if someone received a PCR receipt for a $25 contribution, that's never going to be itemized to us, and I won't be able to tell you, beyond that.
Senator Bolden?
Yeah, that's helpful, thank you. I'm just wondering, it's a wonderful program, and I'm not sure that everyone knows about it and takes advantage of it, so I'm just trying to get a sense of how many people, could be using it that aren't, so thank you.
Sure. Senator Bolden, our bill today is hopefully providing incentives. Any other members, questions? Senator Barr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sigurdsson, I just wanted to commend you on frugalness, because I was looking at your presentation, and you're probably doubling or tripling the number of reports you're going to do, and you, in your previous piece there about your budget, you think you don't need a budget increase. I just want to say job well done for being frugal with the taxpayers' dollars for adding extra work.
Thank you.
Excellent. Members, any other questions? All right, excellent. Well, thank you, Mr. Sigurdsson. We appreciate it. And I think you covered the areas that we hear about, right? All the changes in the lobby side. And I'm sure we haven't seen the last of you for this year trying to address those issues. So we will continue to work on those. Next up, we're going to have Senate File 9, Senator Rest. And Mr. Sigurdsson, I think if you would stick around or shift over one seat, if it's okay with Senator Rest, I think you'll be an important part of this conversation. And then while Senator Rest is coming up, we've got two members who were avoiding the introduction when we started. So Senator Matthews, if you would start, and then nudge the gentleman next to you and have him do his, then we'll have Senator Marty do his introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was involved in heavy conversations in my office about a different subject, so apologies for being a little late. Andrew Matthews, represent Senate District 27. My hometown is in Princeton, and I represent the communities of Princeton, Zimmerman, Big Lake, Becker, Clear Lake, and St. Francis, as well as some of the rural communities surrounding those. So glad to continue my work here on the Elections Committee and looking forward to the year ahead of us.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Matthews. Senator Marty?
And John Marty, representing District 40, which is 6 suburbs in Northeast Metro. Glad to be back on the committee.
Thank you, Senator Marty. And so today we have before us, Senator Rest has brought forth our first bill in our committee is Senate File 9. Senator Barr, would you like to move Senate File 9?
Mr. Chair, where's it going from here?
No, just move it.
Just move it. Okay, it's moved.
Yeah, no.
Consider it moved.
Just so we bring it into committee. So Senator Rest, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to present Senate File 9 and appreciate the co-authorship of both Senator Coran and Senator Westland. The bill's aim is to modernize the way in which we produce and issue PCR refunds. So beginning with Section 1, there's a lot of data practices issues with regard to, and data privacy issues with regard to this subject. And if the committee acts favorably on the bill, the motion should include a re-referral to the Committee on the Judiciary. From there, favorable action on the bill in Judiciary, which it received last year as well. The bill will go to the Committee on Taxes. So in Section 1, the reference is to an electronic reporting system that will be required by the Department of Revenue to prepare, that the board prepares, the Campaign Finance Board prepares the appropriate data to be able to send to the, thank you, to be able to send to, this summer I'm getting my knees replaced, and so I'll be able to pick up my purse off the floor without help, but I appreciate that. The board will compile the appropriate information to be able to send to the Department of Revenue to generate the PCRs for distribution by a candidate or a political party, et cetera, to the person that has made the contribution. And this only applies to contributions made by individuals in the same way and with all the same restrictions and who they can be and so forth in our system. The effective date is the one thing that's been changed in the bill because it was not, it was part of the tax bill last year, but it did not survive the end of session. So the effective date, now I'm looking at line 2.3, is going to be January 1 of 2027 to allow all the electronic and the computer programs that need to be put in place, including, I certainly hope, a lot of beta testing. So Section 2 then asks and requires that now the receipts be in an electronic format with information provided by the board to the Department of Revenue. And that's at lines 2.7 to 2.8. The entities that can receive contributions are not changed. In 2.9, strike the word form and keep the word receipt. So it will not be the kind of paper form that we have currently. But you'll note later on in the bill that does not prevent a candidate or a political party from printing the electronic receipt and forwarding it to the contributor. Can be done electronically, but it could also be done by printing it and sending it on. We do address the issue in the bill of, and this has happened in sometimes of the, whether it's Act Red or Act Blue or green or purple or whatever it is, system that can be used. We have seen mischief, I will call it, when someone wants to make a $100 contribution to some $100 contribution total, and they send it to 20 different campaigns. That will not be permitted. The minimum contribution will have to be at least $10 in order to use this system. And so that is covered in lines in this same section 2 on lines 2.14 and requiring and that it be in the electronic format and include some unique identification numbers. So one of those is a unique receipt validation number, and what that does is to allow the Commissioner of Revenue to verify the information that is on the receipt. And 217 and 218 is where it can be provided through a printed copy of the receipt, which is very different than just a mere paper copy. That's not what we're talking about here. You can print it, it can become paper, but it must be first generated electronically. There remains the, later on, there remains the same requirement that candidates receiving or participating in this have to agree to spending limits that are set by the Campaign Finance Board. So that's covered in two, and I'm going to ask, yes, okay, I was looking for the A, which is up in 2.5. Beginning at 2.19, letter B, the board has to, at least once a week, provide the Commissioner of Revenue with a receipt validation report. So that will go on every single week that there are a candidate or a political party receives a contribution through this new system. And then the rest of that, from 219 down to 226, the information that's going to be required to be reported to the board, and it has to include, which generally is done now with the paper receipts, the date and amount of the contribution, the name and address of the contributor, and the and your campaign identification number, which I would think, if I could go just down the line here, everybody knows their campaign identification number, 15163. That's me. Okay, so I'm sure that all of you know too. And then that receipt validation number is going to be attached to the contribution, assigned to the contribution. So because of that, there's 4 or 5 words beginning in on line 2.27 about and striking. It's just a receipt, so it's striking once again the words form and certainly or a facsimile of one, so that you we're not talking about copying a paper receipt. What you can do, again, is print the electronic receipt if you care to send it to the contributor in that form, although it will be reported to the Department of Revenue in an electronic format. Again, there's lots of concerns as this proposal was being developed over the last couple of years about protection of someone's data. And on page 3, line 5, this data is going to be classified as non-public data. And that means that it's available to the person who is identified with the data, but not to anyone else. And that's how it's defined in statute under Chapter 13. Then, beginning on Section 3, there was concern about, well, what if people make more than one contribution a year? Right now, we ask them to collect the receipts, the PCRs, and then submit them to the Department of Revenue. And obviously, then the refund cannot exceed $75 as an individual or $150 for a couple. And that's the maximum refund in a calendar year. And to put an accountability feature to it, lines 3.15 and 16, the commissioner can't issue a refund, whether it's in one payment or in aggregate, or somebody could have a $30 contribution. That one he or she would get the receipt, and then another $30 one. And then that information will be kept by the Department of Revenue to know that that the contribution refund program is still valid for that information. The information and the commissioner then may not issue a refund that exceeds that maximum refund amount that was specified above. That is, again, $75 for an individual, $150 for a couple. Starting with lines 3.18, again, the reference not to a paper form, but to a receipt that is generated electronically. Or in 2, a claim using the electronic filing system that was authorized in the paragraph above. B, under this, the claim has to be filed with the commissioner. Of course, throughout this, commissioner is referring to the commissioner of revenue. And a claim is, this is where we establish a minimum, so we don't have 100 $5 contributions made by a single individual intent on usually doing nothing but mischief. So that multiple claims are allowed until that maximum is reached. Moving on, there's no other changes in that section until you look at I, that, and here is what we haven't gotten to yet, and that's on 5.4, that the commissioner is ordered to establish an electronic filing system by which claims or in which refunds are claimed, and then the same kind of starting date that has to be done for any, it has to be ready for any contributions that are made after calendar year 2026. So you can say, well, I'm looking at that. So that means this is not going to be required for your 2026 election cycle, neither for the House nor the Senate. This will go into place, actually not even for the Senate, until the 2030 election. So plenty of time for testing it, for getting any kind of bugs out of it, and that will also be tested on the Minnesota House of Representatives, not on the Minnesota Senate, so you can all cheer. Thank you, Senator Barr. And then the appropriation is left blank, and it will continue to be left blank until it gets to the tax committee. And if it is within our target, we certainly will provide the appropriate amount for this system to be developed, and we will put the money, the number in the Senate omnibus tax bill. Mr. Chairman, that's the bill, and I appreciate the support. Do you have any questions?
Excellent, Senator Rust.
You can refer them both to me, but also to Senator Coran, who's done a lot of work on this, and most especially to your vice chair today, I guess, or I don't know who your vice chair is today, but Senator Carlson's vice chair, sorry, Senator Barr, who have been extraordinarily attentive to the details of this proposal, and I hope that this year we can put it in place so that it will be ready for the 2028 election.
Excellent. Senator Rest, we have one testifier, and so we'd like to have the testifier come up, and then we'll take questions.
Okay.
Ms. Hartnett, as you come up, please state your name and who you're with, and then the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Mary Hartnett. I'm with Clean Elections Minnesota. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that advocates for healthy and inclusive democracy. And I want to thank Senator Rest for introducing this bipartisan bill, and to the committee for giving us time to testify today. The excessive amount of big and dark money flowing to elections is staggering and threatens our democracy. A Pew Research study from the fall of 2023 said that Americans feel major donors have too much influence. Large minorities across party lines say that big campaign donors and special interests have too much influence on elections. People in members-owned districts, by contrast, are widely viewed as having too little influence. Public financing programs put more power into the hands of everyday voters. This bill will help in a small but important way to offset the imbalance by making part of one of the Minnesota's public financing programs that we have in Minnesota, the PCR, much easier to use. In 2023, there was unanimous support when Senator Rest introduced her bipartisan bill to increase the PCR from $50 to $75 for individuals and from $100 to $150 per household. And during that deliberation of the bill, there was discussion about the difficulty of using the PCR's current paper-based reimbursement system. There was consensus from both sides of the aisle that it needed to be made more user-friendly and modernized to increase participation. And in 2024, a modernization bill passed both bodies but didn't make it across the finish line. We hope that changes this year. The bill will make it easier for voters to use and make them more engaged in the political process, and hopefully it will increase participation and revenue for the PCR and will make candidates less dependent on big donors and more accountable to voters. As Mr. Sigurdson mentioned, 93% of candidates participated on this election cycle, and it accounts for 30% of donations to candidates were refunded. And we'll hope the bill leads to more citizens participating in the program and increasing the amount of small donors. This is a great bill. We believe we need to provide more options for public financing, but modernizing the existing process we have is a great first step in encouraging participation in the program and empowering voters and strengthening our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hartnett. And Senator Rest, before we go questions, I'll have Mr. Erickson read through the fiscal note.
Could I make one more comment?
Senator Rest, go ahead.
It's a very interesting phenomenon in getting a revenue estimate for a program, which we don't use dynamic scoring. So the revenue estimate is only based on the current use of it. And for those that say, well, nobody's using it, well, it's cheap. So the revenue estimate is going to come in fairly inexpensive.
Yeah.
But then it's going to, if it works like we hope it will, it's going to be easy to use, and more people, individuals will be making those kinds of contributions. It'll be easier for campaign treasurers, not only for individual candidates, but also for political parties to enter into this this new program. But the revenue estimate that we carry for the bill is going to reflect just the current use, which is not as much as perhaps we would like it to be. However, I'll be interested to see that impact of increasing the amounts to $75 and $150. You know probably from your own campaigns how many of your contributors have reached that 70, now who used to give you $50, now give you $75, and then as a married couple, $150. We'll find that out in the revenue estimate.
Excellent.
Because that's been in place now for a year.
Thanks, Senator Rest. And what we'll do is we'll have Mr. Erickson. We'll have Mr. Erickson go through the fiscal note.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, if you would provide that for me now, please. I do not have it.
Oh.
I guess I have
Senator Rest, we'll get a copy for you.
now.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Sigurdson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The fiscal note for Senate File 9 should be included in your packets and now at the table for Senator Rest. There's two agencies on the fiscal note. There's the Department of Revenue, which, without going through all of the painstaking details of what will go in, essentially has said that the process of standing up the electronic submission process can be absorbed within existing staff. So no appropriation should be necessary for the Department of Revenue. The Campaign Finance Board also has no reported expenses and actually shows a small savings in each year beginning with fiscal 27 when the program starts up. In the first year, there would be a savings of $1,000 in postage and then $3,000 in postage ongoing, as well as no longer a need to print the receipt books at a savings of $14,000 in the first year. So at this point, usually I would suggest how we might fill in those blanks on that last page. And in this case, I think, Mr. Chair and Senator Rest, if you wanted to write this to the fiscal note, you could actually delete section 4 altogether on page 5.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Erickson.
Tax Committee is happy to bear the cost.
Senator Rest, what was that?
I said we're happy to bear the cost.
Oh, yes. Great. So with that, members, I think we have Senator Lucero first on board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not been new to the committee. I've never seen this bill or topic before. This is brand new to me. So I have a series of questions and perhaps have been answered in past iterations. It sounds like this is not a newer topic necessarily. So, and I guess with all my question, it sounds like there's also bipartisan efforts in this. So I guess my question, Mr. Chair, could be to you or to anybody who might know them. And I have several questions. The first is, in that last, I'll start with a comment I just heard that the costs would be absorbed by existing, I think, Department of Revenue employees is what I heard. So then what comes to mind is the software system, the code that's going to be used for this program. Is it a newly developed program or is it an existing, and then the hardware that it's going to be housed on, servers, et cetera?
So, Senator Lucero, so there's two components, right? Campaign finance. So the fiscal note covers the modifications necessary for campaign finance to do the confirmation. Well, you already do numbers, but the unique confirmation numbers, and then the integration and delivering that information to the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue has a new integrated tax system that allows them to, from their words, appears to be fairly easy to configure to put up a tax form to be able to file online, as they have online filing capabilities today. So they will just modernize and add the PCR form to that online filing capability. And what essentially will happen is it will be an incentive to us, all of those of us who collect donations, to enter the information into campaign finance as soon as possible. You will receive a confirmation number, and that confirmation number will allow them to enter it into the online PCR, and/or we still have a paper option for the PCR. That's not going to go away for somebody claiming their refund. But in both of those, the form will change and the electronic version will change. Is all you have to do is you have to key in your vital information, your name and address and your social security number. So we never touch any of that. The individual will do it themselves. They key in the control number of each of their donation receipts that they have, and it will pre-populate the payment that was made or the donation that was made. You will affirm that, and you will hit send, and it will be filed. You can collect the add the direct deposit information if you so choose, and then the refund will be issued in likely just a few days from the time they submit it, if they choose electronically, or the traditional couple weeks if they submit it on paper. Does that cover your question? Part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a follow-up, several follow-ups. The next one, okay, Mr. Chair, you just referenced Social Security number. So do I understand correctly that when the contributor is entering information among the piece of information that is now new will be their Social Security number?
Senator Lucero, that is not new from the filing piece. The new part, they have to provide the Social Security number on the paper form. Now it will also be in addition as an electronic option hosted and managed by the Department of Revenue.
Got it. Okay, yep. So the form that they submit now includes Social Security number.
That is correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. Mr. Lucero, or Senator Lucero, you should claim your own contributions and try it.
It's called delegation. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then the next question I have is in terms of the data. So I did see, and I appreciate the reference to, say, where was that line? 3.5 through 3.7 non-public data. So we recently had headlines where there was, I guess it's being described as a potential clerical error where non-public data has been disclosed and there's a breach. If something similar to happen, despite how it's categorized, there are breaches, what is the penalty per this that would, who would be accountable And what is that penalty if there is a data breach, let's say from a clerical error?
So Senator Lucero, so this is hosted by the Department of Revenue and the existing solutions where they provide that for a wide variety of tax applications today.
And perhaps, I'm sorry for interrupting, perhaps this is that's a 13 point, that's chapter 13 questions, maybe that's a better answer than a different.
Yeah, and with that though, they are also held to extraordinarily high standards because they also obtain and have federal tax information. So they take security very seriously. The finite details of exactly whose liability that is, I am unaware, but it's a routine activity within the Department of Revenue for which they have to manage, thus why their systems stand freely from all of our other systems because of the requirements on them by the Department of, or the IRS for maintenance of all information integrated with our Minnesota information as well.
And I'll do some more digging. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. And then the last question I would have is just logistics. So I have a contributor right now, and I'm very thankful for all contributions. He contributes a reoccurring $5 per month, and it's taken out of his account via a debit card, I believe. And so under this system, could you just walk me through how would that $5 monthly contribution play in terms of a PCR refund? So it's $5 times 12 months, so his contribution annually is $60.
So Senator Lucero, so with that, he could claim a refund. You will, every time he makes a payment, you get issue him a receipt for $5. It will have a unique control number, and it will register that with the Department of Revenue. In the bill, he could file and collect and return his $10. Every time he accumulates $10 and makes 2 payments, he could actually file for that refund, or he could wait until all payments were made or donations were made, and then you would enter in all the control numbers, and then, or if it's up to you, I guess, from a receipting perspective, you do it once or you do it every month. The collection, the totality of those payments made, he can file them every 10, not every single $5 payment, but at the minimum, every $10, he could claim his refund for that $10. And the system will manage until they reach the cap per individual, so they will not be refunded greater than they're eligible for from a PCR perspective. Yep. Yep. Senator Lucero?
Thank you. One more question I just thought of. There are many times in the past I've hosted events that have been in parks or other formats where I'm literally sitting there with my PCR receipt book and I'm at a table, and somebody will come and they'll make a contribution. I fill out the receipt and give them the paperwork and the receipt right then and there. There's no computers involved. There's no printer accessible. So how would this work in a similar format?
Senator Lucero, so you will have the option to key that in right into campaign finance immediately, or collect that information and key it in when you receive, and then you'll have the opportunity as well to utilize an email, the control numbers in an email receipt immediately after you enter it into the campaign finance software. That is one of the changes for us as candidates. We chose, our option chose to get rid of the receipting book, because what receipt book have you sent to campaign finance to validate the contributions made to you? Have you ever sent one?
Could you repeat the question?
Your copy, which is the affirmation that that campaign donation was made to an authorizing or authorized individual, that information is never sent into anybody. So,
I have stacks of books, Mr. Chair, of the pink hard
Senator Lucero, that's my point. We've never sent the source information for the Department of Revenue or campaign finance to validate that receipt came from a legitimate candidate or entity. So we're closing a loop that I believe is necessary and builds in all the Senate incentives for us to be efficient, right? Utilize, if you can. We have access to technology, and now that they've upgraded the campaign finance software, log in and do those things on the spot, and you could give the control number to somebody, and literally the next day, Senator Rustin amendment coming, on the next day, actually be able to go out and file that electronically through the Department of Revenue. So that's how it's, as it's designed today, and I think it'll work pretty slick. It does. We did purposely choose the option to close it, because then we actually have true validation from the source, and that the taxpayer receives that information. We're free of any information that we personally identifying. They control that. That relationship with the Department of Revenue, and they should get a really quick turnaround on that refund.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Senator Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, Mr. Chair, you indicated that Senator Lucero could issue that receipt for $5. However, line 2.14 indicates that an official refund receipt must only be issued for a contribution of $10 or more.
Senator Weber? Yeah, I think you're right as it reads. And so at $10, you're right. At the statute, every $10, you're right. He could issue the receipt, or he could wait until all $65 of the contribution, the year's payments are made. So
Before you issued the receipt.
before you issue the receipt, and then
They could accumulate, Mr. Chairman, Senator Weber, they could accumulate $5 checks and then start issuing receipt when it reached $10.
yes, Senator Weber, you are correct. We as candidates can issue in $10 increments. So every 2 months, is it monthly? Your candidate makes it.
Mr. Chair, it is $5 per month, but in such a scenario, if I issued just one receipt after 12 or every 2, what would my contribution date be? How could I do that?
Mr. Sigurdson?
Mr. Chair, Senator Lucero, if I understand your question, the way that the CFRO software is going to need to work here is to say, okay, you've entered in a contribution, do you wish to issue a PCR receipt? And if it's for less than $10, the software is going to say, or the application is going to say, it's not sufficient to issue a receipt for this individual. But now you enter in another $5, you push the button that says, generate a receipt for this individual. Now it's over $10, and it will for those 2 contributions. So I guess the CFRO is going to be doing the filtering for you, and if there's over $10 or $10 at that point, then it'll issue a receipt.
Thank you, Mr. Sigurdson. Senator Weber?
Thank you. One more question. I assume I know the answer to this, but I want to double check. So, so the minimum contribution, whether someone wishes to file a paper receipt or with an electronic receipt, is still going to be $10. Is that correct?
Senator Rest,
Well,
for a refund.
it will be a printed receipt if someone requests it, but at that minimum of $10. And I don't know how better to explain it than Mr. Sigurdson did at this point. And you certainly could, inform your donors that of what the new program is going to be, and hope that over the course of a year that a single donor gives you, hope it's not 12 $1 contributions, which you are required to report anyway, but not that, but that once their contributions in any form reaches, that you have to keep track of, reaches $10, they will get this electronic receipt, which then can be printed and then sent in to the Department of Revenue, just like you do now.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Senator, thank you. And Senator Westland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Weber, because you caught the same thing that I did. But I think then, if this is going to work in the way Mr. Sigurdson has suggested, that as you're entering these, you have the option of checking print a receipt, and it's going to tell you you don't have enough to print a receipt. I do think that on line 2.14, that perhaps that may need to be changed to say an official refund receipt must only be issued for aggregate contributions of $10 or more. That would, because otherwise we may run into issues with the situation where somebody is, well, it just clarifies the situation.
Yeah, Senator Westland, it sounds like Mr. Sigurdson just clarified that they could administratively take care of that if we issue them for every $5. and it would be cumulative and contained within the campaign finance software to produce a receipt for that $10 when it meets that threshold, so it could be printed, and then they can claim their refund. Senator Westland, any follow? Okay. Thank you. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one comment maybe to you or to the author. I don't know that this is necessarily something to amend into this language, but just to quickly comment, I hope that when the system is set up, that we can have a short and easy to state website domain to our donors for how they get access to this system. Because I pulled up the Department of Revenue's website, and it's revenue.state.mn.us. And I'm just imagining a scenario where I'm trying to tell someone who's got a pen and paper in their hand, like, all right, write this down. It's political contribution refund .revenue.state.mn. No, you missed the state. Oh, add the US at the end. So if we could find something short and succinct, I don't know if PCR.com is available or not, but something easy to remember to logistically. To
Senator Matthews, I like the suggestion as well. Either the web, right, the short URL, and or Mr. Sigurdsson, in the production of the receipts, could you produce a QR code that takes you to the website as well? We can't, we'll have to check with revenue, but for the revenue side.
And the reason why
Senator
I'm looking at, the reason why I'm looking at the screen is I wish we had this in the Capitol, because I don't have to hear you.
Read the translation.
I can watch what you're saying up there, and I really, really appreciate that, particularly on occasions when I don't have my hearing aids in. But in requiring the Department of Revenue to set up a system, let me tell you, Senator Matthews, they're going to make it user-friendly. You won't have to do anything except maybe know how to use a QR code, which is a challenge to some people still, but hopefully in the next couple of years, that challenge will be overcome, and it'll be easy to understand and to access, and it certainly will be to the advantage of your campaigns as well as the Department of Revenue, to make it as easy as possible to, without complications, to for your campaign to enter the information, and for the contributor to receive their refund.
Yeah, and
Really
and Senator Matthews and everyone, when we it's going to be important, and from an age perspective, I believe, you know, there will be challenges. When we looked at it, how quickly could we get not just adding an electronic option, but how many would use it? And I believe it was almost 70% of the people who claim a PCR were over the age of 65. And so we're keeping paper for a long time, and so it won't change for them. But I agree with the suggestions. Department of Revenue, of course, I think has been very accommodating in this process, and they have systems in place today. But I like your suggestion of simplification of how do we get to that form. And we can consider those. Those will be notes that we'll take and feed to them after this, when this bill passes. So with that, any other questions? Senator Lucero?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that note, and I appreciate Senator Matthews, so you'll be happy to know I just purchased mnpcr.com, and I will make it available for about 1,000% markup. So,
thanks, Senator Lucero. I knew I actually knew
Did you see that coming?
I actually did. So, but with that, Senator Rest, I spoke to Mr. Sigurdsson beforehand, and one of the things I talked to him about was, as we bring this up, I said, hey, in the future, once it starts working, well, I'll look to get our data file from campaign finance to revenue, maybe daily instead of just weekly. And his response was, we're going to do it. It doesn't matter. They're going to automate it, and it's going to be daily. So what I would like to suggest is that we have an oral amendment prepared, and if somebody would like to hear it, and then maybe Senator Westland.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with that, but I think I could go back and look at the language that it says at least once weekly, does it not? and you want to change that
Senator Rest,
to
you are correct.
once a day?
Yeah, and I think we just daily.
I have no objection to that.
Yeah, so we'll have Ms. Stengel read it, and then if Senator Westland would consider moving that oral amendment, and then we'll we'll go for it. Ms. Stengel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's two changes to accomplish this. On page 2, line 19, delete the phrase "at least once a week" and insert "once each business day." On page 2, line 20, delete the phrase "during the week" and insert "since the previous report."
Mr. Chairman, you're not finished, but I'm going to ask you to repeat it so I can mark my bill.
Yes. On page 2, line 19, delete "at least once a week" and insert "once each business day." On page 2, line 20, delete "during the week" and insert "since the previous report." So that paragraph would say then, once each business day, the board must provide the Commissioner of Revenue a receipt validation report. For each contribution reported to the board since the previous report, the report must include, and then it goes on without change.
Senator Rest? Are you okay?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask for it in writing after the committee adjourns, if you don't matter. Or Ms. Stengel can just email it to me.
Thank you, Senator Rest. And so, Senator Westland, would you like to move the oral amendment which Ms. Stengel just read?
Senator Cran, I can, but I think Senator Port has her hand raised on the Zoom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Port. Senator Port.
Thank you, Chair Cran. Not sure if we need to move it first or if I can ask a question about it. I'm just thinking through, what happens if the campaign finance office loses power or is down because they're getting a Wi-Fi upgrade or something and they wouldn't be able to send it that day? Does that put them in a position where they would then be not fulfilling the requirements of the law? Whereas currently it allows them to send it once a day, but it doesn't put them in a position where they would be, not fulfilling the requirements if something were to happen.
Excellent. Thanks, Senator Port. Senator Rest?
Mr. Chairman, I think routinely when a system is down, it usually puts up a message saying you can no longer, or your bank account or digital banking is down for 2 days, at least mine is, going to be, as they put in a new digital banking system. So I don't think that is an issue, and I don't know if you need clarifying language, but if you start putting every single instance of how something could fail, rather than just what the digital community expects, that paragraph could be 10 lines long. So I really don't, unless there's some general phrase you could come up with, I wouldn't want to start listing every single instance.
Thanks, Senator Rest. Senator Port, did you raise your hand again?
Yeah, I guess I think that's my point. Is this a necessary change when the language that's already in there allows for it, and Mr. Sigurdsson explained that it would already happen that way? Is it a necessary change to put into statute that it's required to be done daily when we know that there are occasionally things that happen that might not allow that to happen? It just seems to me like this might not be a necessary change.
Thanks, Senator Port. I actually believe we have agreement from Mr. Sigurdsson, because he's currently in charge. When Mr. Sigurdsson moves on and we have some oral agreement, I would rather see daily. Everything we do has an accommodation for a technical glitch, not only just from the campaign finance software, right? When we have those things, when we go to enter, if there's a glitch, we're notified, and you can't access those things immediately, or it could be for a day. This one is going to be transparent from the individual. We don't have any penalties in here for them. And so what it would delay is somebody that went into, if it was out for a day and somebody entered their control number, it may not be available. And in those cases, would be a recommendation, hopefully as we build it, that, hey, if it's not available, you know, check tomorrow or later, as they're filing their PCR form with the Department of Revenue. So I think we're okay. Senator Westland, would you like to move that oral amendment?
I would like to move the oral amendment as indicated by council.
Excellent. Senator Westland moves the oral amendment to Senate File 9. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those nay? Motion
Nay.
carries. Oh, one nay. Or did you, Senator Port, did you register nay? Or okay, thank you. One nay, so the motion carries. With that, Senator Rest, I think we have, we've got to move your bill. Any other closing comments? Senator Rest?
No, I'm finished.
Excellent. So this bill is going to go off to Judiciary and Finance. So Senator Barr, would you like to move Senate File 9 be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety?
So moved.
Senator Barr moves that Senate File 9 be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. With that, members and audience, we have no further business before us. The Committee on Elections is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Jack.